Hello, hello, hello. So we're back with another top 5 lines video, and this one is for top 5 lines for beginners in 2025. So what are the best tech trees for new players coming to World of Warships? So let's get started. So let's start off. These are going to be in no particular order. To start off, the first line we'll be going for is going to be the American Destroyer line, the Gearing line. So the Gearing line are in the American tech tree. As you can see here, you start up at the Samson, you go all the way down to the Gearing, and then the super ship Humphreys is at the end. But your main goal is to go down the line and go to the Gearing. My overall experience of the Gearing line is a really jack-of-all-trade destroyers where the guns and the torpedoes are both good, but they're not great. So it's just a more jack-of-all-trade, good support destroyer line, good torpedoes, good guns, a really good line to teach the basics of destroying or spotting or using your concealment to your advantage. The destroyers also, most of them, or all of them, come with DCP, a smoke, and then you can do engine boost or defensive AA. I personally would recommend engine boost on all of the lines and not using the DFAA. But that's more of a personal preference for anyone playing the line. So gearing would be my first suggestion. And if you're not really interested in the gearing line, another really strong jack-of-all-trade destroyer that I personally would recommend over the gearing, because it's just more of my preference, is the daring line. So the daring line is going to be in the British tech tree. As you see, you go down the Weymouth here and then the Medea, and you go all the way down to the daring. The daring line overall is more focused on the guns. They have the short fuse AP for the daring line. Is it the what tier? When does it start for the short fuse AP for the British SAT?
Jutland, so tier 9.
Okay, so at the Jutland, the tier 9, the AP for the British goes from regular AP to a short fuse AP, where it makes it really effective at battling other destroyers. So if you see a broadside destroyer within, say, like 7 kilometers, and you shoot AP at them, you're going to do it's going to arm on them, and you're going to do a lot of damage, and it will just obliterate just the destroyers. HE is also really good on this ship as well, for the whole line. Most of the line comes with all of the line comes with a short burst smoke generator, which means that it has a quick action time and a quick reload, but it also does not have a very long lasting time, so it doesn't last very long. So it's more of meant as a disengagement tool or a short farming tool, to be able to get in and out of situations quickly or to evade detection from an aircraft carrier. This is a really good line to help you teach you more like situational awareness on when to engage other destroyers and when kind of to back off and use more of your torpedoes or just a farm. The line does come with a 3-kilometer hydro, which is very useful for spotting torpedoes, as well as a heal, which is really, really nice. The British line for the daring also has single fire torpedoes or like a full salvo, so you can choose to single fire your torpedoes in a one line, or you can fire it like a normal salvo of torpedoes, and that's really useful if you fight a bow-wind ship that's like an island, right? It's like an island camping ship and you're within your torpedo range. You can just single fire your torpedoes and nuke battleships or destroyers, battleships or cruisers alike that are sitting at islands, and you'll do a lot of damage with those single point fire torpedoes. So I personally recommend the daring over the gearing, but it comes down to more of a preference, right? The daring is more of a gun focused jack of all trade ship, while the gearing is more of a focused on more torpedoes and being more of a support ship, using its smokes to help cover its teammates or help give smoke to ships that are trying to farm and not get destroyed pretty much. So those are the 2 destroyer lines we'd be recommending. Now for cruisers, we'd recommend the legendary Zao. Zao is one of the oldest cruisers in the game, and till this day, it's a very strong ship. And they recently buffed it as well, giving it better torpedo angles as well as giving it better gun angles as well, which just makes this ship even more formidable of a cruiser. This cruiser is a very kind of like a standard, like this is like what you expect from a farming kiting cruiser, right? It has really strong HE to be able to do a lot of damage on battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. It has a very high fire chance for the gun caliber. Amazing gun range as well with the spotter plane as well, so it does really good with that. It also has really nice concealment as well. It also comes with the Japanese torpedoes with 10 per side, which is a lot of torpedoes, with a 12-kilometer range. So as you're kiting away from the enemy, you can use those torpedoes as enemies pushing into you to get a lot of torpedo hits and to get floods, which will make them use their damage control party. And then you can use your HE to get fire damage and do a lot of damage on them with that. And the Zao is in the Japanese tech tree line. As you can see here, it starts here at tier 1 and it goes all the way down to the Zao. Zao is also one of the few ships in the game. Oh, sorry, the Zao line is one of the few lines in the game that has the submarine surveillance as well. So you are able to help spot submarines in your matches as well if they're being a nuisance and they're within the range of 7 kilometers. When does that start for the tech tree for the Zao? I gotta check. I think it's the tier. Let's see, tier 7 or is it tier? I wonder if it starts at tier
Zao,
6.
right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Let's see. It starts at tier 6. Okay. Okay. So the submarine surveillance starts.
For Furitaka, I see it at tier 5.
Oh. Oh, damn. So it goes down all the way to tier 5? Oh, wow.
Anything that can see us up.
That's actually really nice. I didn't think it would go down that far, so that's really good. So you get submarine surveillance all the way down to tier 5. That's really useful in those lower tiers. I like that. I like that a lot. But yeah, what else would you like to add about the Zao? I know I covered a lot, but is there anything you think I missed about the Zao?
So, one of the strongest parts about the Zao line is their hard-hitting HE shells. They have a pretty high alpha strike, and it's also helped by their improved accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a destroyer pop up and you land a good salvo, you can easily chunk him for half his health.
Oh,
The
yeah.
guns are also very consistent. Tier 5 to 9 actually uses the same guns, so it gives you a lot of time to learn their ballistics.
Mm-hmm.
The most notable drawback is their lack of range. So, Zao's gun range is like 16 or so, which is kind of low compared to other cruisers. So you have to be kind of careful on like where you fight. It encourages you to use stealth to get into position before you open up.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
The turret angles are also not the best, especially for the mid-tier cruisers. That third turret is actually the death of many a novice player. It forces you to show broadside, and if you time it incorrectly, that battleship's salvo will send you back to port.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the torpedoes.
I know that recently they were buffing in 14.3, they're buffing the torpedo angles for the lower tier cruisers, correct? I don't think they're buffing the gun angles, they're buffing the torpedo angles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's really good. I like that.
Yes, it will let you fire torpedoes at better angles, but that's still not your primary armament. It's not until Ibuki and Mogami and Ibuki where you can use the torpedoes, where you get to stealth torpedo, but the range is still pretty small, so it's only used when you're kiting away. Still, it's a pretty nice addition since you have a better chance of firing them before you resort to your guns.
And all of these lines that we are suggesting, they don't need super high level commanders to run. That's why in these kind of beginner guide videos, we don't recommend a lot of like the more meta lines, like the Liberta or the Schlieffen or any line that really requires having a full 21 point commander to run. Because a lot of the time well, pretty much every time in those meta lines where you you have to take a full commander build. If you don't, you're just not going to play as well because the ship isn't going to do as well in general. So normally what we do is we recommend lines that can operate with a lower level commander so that you're able to grind it up. And then over time, you can move more to those more niche and meta lines for the game. So some people are like, oh, why aren't you recommending the Liberta or the Schlieffen? That's kind of the reason why.
So what makes a good beginner line is the ease of accessibility. Is, as Bo said, commander skills is an important part. Another important part is like some ships really like getting their unique upgrade to become especially powerful, but
Mm-hmm.
of course a beginner won't have access to the research bureau for a long time. Other
Yeah.
lines also may have like a niche playstyle or something that's very hard, that takes longer to pick up on. So, say for example, while like Des Moines is a very good line, it's also sometimes hard to play, especially at the higher tiers, where you're encouraged to get close, but the long range meta can make it very hard to do so, and you
Mm-hmm.
just explode before you're able
Also,
to do your damage.
yeah, also submarines. Because a Des Moines playstyle is very island heavy. If you have a submarine in your match, that's going to be quite painful.
hmm So we recommend those lines just for the beginners to learn the foundations and get a solid foothold before they move on to more advanced lines.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we did recommendations for destroyers. We did a recommendation for a beginner cruiser. Let's do a recommendations for battleships. So for the two battleship recommendations, the first is going to be the Montana. So the Montana is in the USA Tech tree. You start at the Erie, you go down to South Carolina, and then you can see there are three battleship lines for the Americans. There's the Vermont, Montana, and Louisiana. So you're going to want to go to the Colorado, and then when you have enough base XP, you're then going to grind down the North Cal, the Iowa, then you'll go down to the Montana. So the Montana is one of the oldest premiums in the game. It's not a premium, sorry, tech trees in the game. It's one of the oldest. And it's been the old, reliable, jack of all trade, just great beginner trainer battleship ever since it's been in the game. It has great armor for the tier, 32 millimeters of armor, a 38 millimeter deck, 32 millimeters inside with the great side armor as well. It is quite difficult to citadel a Montana, but if if the Montana is sitting broadside, of course, you are likely to get citadeled, so you don't want to sail broadside. One thing that's great about the American line is the fact that it does come with very long damage control parties, and when you build into it, it goes up to 28 seconds with a 76-second cooldown. So it can be a very tanky tool to be able to not be set on fire or flood in battle. Also, it comes with the American improved heal, which how much more of a heal is it SAT for the Americans compared to other nations?
Normal heal amount is about 14%. The US improved heal is about 18%.
Yeah, so that 4% may not seem a lot, but it is when you're using a lot of these heals. So that 4% can add up to, if you build into getting more heals, you get 20% extra health just because of that 4%, which can really add up in a battle, especially when it's like a long match. That 20% can really help save you in a match. So that American improved heal is really nice. What the Montana is great at teaching players the utility of both HE and AP. The HE on the Montana is really strong. So normally, how some players will play Montana, or most, they'll use HE at very long distances on other enemy battleships that are kind of bow in or really heavily angled, or if they're kiting away and you're not able to get that good side shot. And then when they get a little bit closer, maybe around 16 to 15 kilometers, they'll switch over to AP and shoot more of the sides of like cruisers or battleships or anything really. And you'll do a lot of damage with the American AP. Now, the American AP is a little bit harder to aim than compared to other nations. And that's due to the fact that the American AP is, what's the term for it? It's heavy AP, right?
Historically, the U.S. ships used super heavy shells, but in game it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, so the American AP, or it just means that the shells are a little bit slower than compared to your HE. So you'll find on the American battleships for the Montana line that the HE will be a little bit easier to hit because the shells are slightly faster than the AP. It's like such a small difference that sometimes you'll aim with HE and then you'll switch back to AP and you're like, wait a minute, why did that not hit? And it's because the AP is slightly slower than the HE. So you kind of have to remember that when you are aiming with the Montana line. Now, this slower AP does make it where the shells are more likely to arm. It's not short fuse AP, it's just the shells are going slower, which means they're more likely to arm inside of a ship rather than going through it. Which is pretty nice, because a lot of the time nowadays, a lot of overpinning can occur. So being able to actually pin a target and not overpin is always a plus in my book. So I always take that. The American line also has really nice anti-air starting at... Would you want to say it starts at the Colorado is when it starts getting good? Or is
Tier
it like...
8.
Yeah, the Tier 8 North Cal. Okay. So the North Carolina is where the anti-air starts getting good for the Americans. With the North Cal, Iowa, and Montana have really nice anti-air, because historically the anti-air is really strong on these ships. Well, historically, the Americans have strong anti-air. Montana isn't a real ship. Iowa is, of course. So, before anybody says anything. Of course, for the Montana line, you want to use spotter plane. It helps you being able to shoot over islands. It's not really like a range that, so when you use a spotter plane, you click C on your keyboard, and it'll help you be able to like look at a up-down view for you to be able to aim over islands easier. So you may like, oh, I don't need the range, but it's not for the range. It's for your ability to be able to aim at a top-down view to be able to shoot at ships that are behind islands. So that's why you would take spotter plane or spotting aircraft and not fighter. Now, if you still want to take fighter, totally up to you, but personally I would take spotting aircraft for that. Now, if you don't want a more jack of all like more of like a jack of all trade beginner Montana line, you can go down the more sniper focused line, which is going to be the Japanese line, the Yamato line. So you see here in the tech tree, you start at the tier 1 and you go down here, and at the Nagato, you grind down the Amagi, Izumo, and Yamato. So for the Yamato line, it has very strong AP, and they're really good snipers. How the dispersion works for the Japanese battleship line is that the further away, what's the distance for SAT? I'll let you explain it a little bit. I'll let you explain it.
So how the Japanese battleship dispersion is a little bit different from everyone else. It's basically, it scales better at range. It still gets less accurate, but compared to other battleships, the range penalty is not as bad. So about roughly 14 or 15 kilometers, as that range, the shells are relatively tighter compared to the other lines.
Mm-hmm.
Also of note is that the Japanese battleships have more of a circular reticle as opposed to the horizontal oval shape that other ships have.
Yep. But
so, on top of that, the Japanese guns, well, it kind of They're a little bit over the place, but in general, they have pretty good penetration, especially at the high tiers.
Yeah, so originally the Yamato, the tier 10, was the only battleship to have 460 millimeter guns. And now this 460 is very important because it allows it to pin bow in 32 millimeters of armor,
Pretty
which
much.
means that any ship that's sitting bow into you with 32 millimeters of armor, you can pin through that. Now, at the time, this made the Yamato a very strong ship due to the fact that it could pin through that 32 millimeters armor and do a lot of damage to battleships that would sit bow in during that time period. So pretty much any tech tree battleship at the time, they couldn't just sit bow into the Yamato, or they would take massive amounts of damage from that 460 millimeter guns. And with that such a big advantage, the Yamato has some significant drawbacks. So one thing is the turret traverse is very slow till this day. Very, 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 very slow. One of the slowest turret traverses in the game, and that's for pretty much all of the tech tree for the Japanese have slow turret traverse. So those turrets are not moving very quickly. So you have to be very careful on how you aim the turrets, because once you have like a side where you're aiming, if you have to turn the turrets all the way around, as you can see, it takes a minute to turn them 180 degrees. So you're not going to have your guns for a very long time. So this ship teaches you positioning importance and having your gun turrets positioned correctly, or you're just not going to be firing your guns for most of the match. And also with this the great guns, also this ship does come with really good armor, but at the same time, it does have a signature citadel weakness. So as you can see right here, there are these little cheeks that people will aim at right here, and they will citadel you and do a lot of damage. So you have to be very careful of these cheeks on the Yamato, and the cheeks are also on the Izumo as well, and I will show you guys that real quick. Oh no, they're not. Sorry, they're not. They're not as prevalent, but they're still kind of there. Yeah, they're not as big as the Yamato. I don't know why I thought the Izumo had like the same cheeks as the. I don't know why I did, but you can still citadel the Izumo pretty easily, but the Yamatos are just more pronounced on that cheek. The cheek is very, very visible there, so definitely be careful when you are playing this line. But out of the two beginner battleship lines, this is definitely more of the sniper line. If you want to learn how to snipe, be more of a sniper, keep your engagements like 14, 15 kilometers and out, that's going to be the Yamato line for you. You don't want to get really close than that because you will be swarmed. The Montana is definitely more of the jack of all trade battleship. Little mixtures of more of what you can do. So take your pick on which one you like more. I personally would take the Montana more because it's more of a jack of all trade, but everyone has their preferences. So I'm a little bit biased toward for the Montana.
Yamato Line is generally considered a bit easier to grind. Fuso, Nagato, Amagi, and Izumo are all considered average to above average.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the American line can be a little bit rough on the Colorado and New Mexico. Let's see, when does it start? New Mexico and Colorado can be a little bit rough. Some people have an issue playing the North Cal and the Iowa, but but to me, I find them great. But some people have problems playing them. But for me, like SAT score said, the Yamato line is generally easier to play due to the fact that the Fuso, Nagato, Amagi, and Izumo are all more consistent in their performance and how they play compared to the American line. So take your pick. And I appreciate you explaining that to them, their SAT score, because I was going to forget that, so I appreciate that. So the final recommendation we have is going to be for an aircraft carrier. So if you are interested in playing CVs, the best beginner CV line we'd recommend is going to be the Midway. So the American tech tree line here, you can see here you start at the Langley and you grind down to the Midway. It's a very good jack of all trade. Pretty much in this game, the Americans are just more of the jack of all trade lines normally. So normally it's a good way to practice or see what you like in particular to the game. Like what niche do you like? And then you can go down different lines that follow that niche. And if you want to explain the Midway to them SAT or that line in particular, I'd appreciate it.
So the line in general is pretty well rounded. You have HE rocket aircraft. You have, for the most part, standard torpedo bombers,
Mm-hmm.
and you have HE dive bombers.
Yep.
So the main squad you'll be using are actually the HE dive bombers.
Mm-hmm.
They are pretty durable, and you can when you land, they're effective against every type of target. So it doesn't matter if you're dropping a destroyer or a battleship or a cruiser. As long as you line it up and RNG is not against you, you can deal some pretty massive damage.
Mm-hmm.
The rockets are pretty solid as well. They have good penetration, so they'll hit almost every target effectively as well. Torpedo bombers are pretty run of the mill, but they will teach you how to use torpedo bombers. And because of their versatility, even if you send out the wrong squad, say for example you send out rockets instead of dive bombers, you're not heavily punished for that. So because of that amazing versatility and the fact the squads themselves are relatively easy to aim and use, I would recommend playing on the Midway line just so you can learn the basics of CV gameplay. The main disadvantage of them is that sometimes they're because they're CVs and they tend to be targeted quite heavily. Some of them are on the squishier side. Ranger in particular is notorious for having almost no armor. So if you're not careful with your positioning, you can easily get your Ranger killed.
Mm-hmm.
And their high detection also sometimes makes it hard to get close to the battle if you want to move up and deploy your squads faster.
Yep, for sure. Now, something else that the Americans have that other nations don't is the fact that you're able to pick two different rockets between the CVs. So you have like the default rockets, right? And then you can buy either the Tiny Tims. I always forget which one it is because it's kind of difficult because they don't really say the name. They're the Tiny Tim rockets, which are meant more for. Oh yeah, the Tiny Tims are meant more for cruisers and battleships. They do a lot of damage with that, and there's less rockets. While the HVAR rockets are meant more for destroyers because you get a lot more rockets. It's meant to do more damage to destroyers or just starting fires in general. While the Tiny Tims are meant more to do a lot of damage to battleships and cruisers. So you can pick, hey, am I going to be an aircraft carrier that focuses more on destroyers or maybe setting more fires to cruisers and battleships? Or I'm going to be focusing more on doing a lot of damage to those cruisers and battleships and being less effective against destroyers. So it's a good way of like seeing kind of what preference you are of an aircraft carrier. Some people like focusing more damage on destroyers. Some of them like doing more damage to battleships and cruisers. So it's a good way to learn like what you like doing as an aircraft carrier. I think that's the only tech tree line that also does that too, SAT score, right?
Sorry, can you repeat again?
Well, I was talking about the Tiny Tims and the HVARs and how it's the only tech tree line that allows you to pick different rockets.
That's the only one as far as I can tell. All the other lines, it's if you pick the second rocket, it's just a straight upgrade in terms
Hmm.
of planes.
Yeah. Because you have the default, and then you can pick either being more destroyer focused or more battleship and cruiser focused. So I like that a lot. I think it's a really cool way to see what you want to do as an aircraft carrier player. I think it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the final recommendation for beginner players, people are gonna ask, well, what destroyer line would you go down? We're just gonna say none.
You mean the submarines, right?
Yeah, submarines. So for submarines, we'd recommend you just get the U-45. That's like the only submarine you need. So you go into here, you go into ships, and you go over here, and you see the U-45. Just get that, and that's the only submarine you need. So there you go. Yeah. That's your submarine recommendation. It's pretty much the easiest submarine to play in the game. So
Yep.
it
And we don't recommend you play subs as your first class anyways. Just go ahead and play the other ships, and then when you finally get the call to play subs, just transfer one of your captains onto him, and you'll learn pretty quickly.
Yep, for sure. Because again, if you want to do a tech tree line submarine down the line, that's fine. The Baleo is pretty strong in that regard for being a jack of all trade submarine.
Honestly, I'd just rather go with the U-2501 line, the German submarine line.
Yeah, that line does hit pretty hard. That is true. That is true. Those torps hurt. And then we have that I-44 freaking tier 10 thing for the Japanese.
I-5644?
Yeah, that's man, that's going to be an interesting video to talk about whenever we do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll have to do a first look at that whenever it enters testing. But anyway, if you guys have any questions or concerns, let us know in the comments down below. And if you have your own top 5 beginner lines for 2025, let us know. And we'll see you guys in the next video.